This week on the Documentary Review Podcast, in a break from our normal format, Jonathan and I act out our favorite documentaries. And if there's time at the end, we'll also discuss the 2015 documentary, The Wolfpack. Welcome to the podcast. This is PT.
This is Jonathan. Glad you can join us.
Yes, that stuff I said wasn't true. If it's your first time listening, I probably confused you there. Like, oh my God, you may have already turned off the thing. That's not true. We're really just going to talk about the documentary.
Yes.
How's it going, Jonathan?
Good. Been a good week. We got a little blizzard out here in Colorado. That was kind of fun. We haven't had one in a while. So
I heard about that.
Yeah. How about you? How's life in land of PT?
It's going pretty good. I'm doing a video every day this month in February, so check them out if you're interested in hearing a guy make videos about books and reading. Come to my channel. If not, you'll be wildly bored by those videos. Go to them.
Yeah, but just a Easter egg. At the end of one of the videos that Tyler's making this month, there's an amateur porn with him and his wife. So if you're, I don't know if that's going to increase your viewership, Ty, or decrease.
Right.
But you should, if you want to find out which episode, you got to watch them all until the end.
Oh man, indeed. Speaking of amateur stuff, let's get into this documentary, huh?
Yeah.
Speaking of amateur productions, that was almost a smooth transition. I almost nailed it, but
you did. You were close.
Tell us about this documentary, Jonathan.
All right. The Wolfpack follows a group of 7 siblings that essentially spent the mass majority of their life in an apartment in New York. And I don't mean, they lived in the apartment and in New York. They just lived in that apartment, not leaving it, and with virtually no contact through the outside world, except for television movies, which plays a great role in their lives. And it kind of goes over their story, and we get to see a very intimate, firsthand look at how that affects a group of young people growing up with no exposure to the outside world. That's kind of the Wolfpack.
Nicely done. So it's been like, I don't know, it's been like over 2 weeks, I think, since we recorded the last episode. So stand in your truth, Jonathan, and tell me, I don't want any sugarcoating here. What is that because you were wildly bored by this documentary? You couldn't make yourself finish it?
No, it did take me 2 times to finish it, but it was only because I didn't have enough time, like a solid, at no point in the last 2 weeks have I had an hour and a half of free time, unless you count sleeping.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really why. I take it you were a bit bored by this documentary. Give it a thumbs up or thumbs down?
I give it a thumbs up. I liked it.
Okay.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up. I liked it for a lot of different reasons. I mean, I don't think it was like a great documentary and it didn't blow my mind, but I really liked how personal the whole documentary was. I thought that was something we don't see too often in the documentaries we do. Certainly, it was cool to see the ultra low budget, but just very up in the subject matter documentary. So that was cool.
Yeah, I'm curious. Speaking of budget, I'm curious how much this cost to make. I'm assuming not very much, but I was looking on the Internet Movie Database page for it, and it said it theatrically it grossed over $1 million theatrically. So
wow,
somebody did pretty good on.
Yeah, I mean, my guess would be budget of $10,000, something like that. I mean, that's just assuming it's expensive to stay in New York for 3 weeks or whatever. It probably costs them about 10 grand. That's about it.
Right. Well, I assume okay. Well, let's talk about this. Because one thing that I actually really liked about the documentary, but that I noticed in some of the online reviews that kind of drove some people crazy, is that we don't learn a lot. There's a lot of unanswered questions in the documentary, which I kind of liked. I liked that it was just focused on this one thing. But for instance, we don't know at all how did the documentary filmmakers learn about this family, or how did they start making this documentary? Any of that kind of stuff. So do you have any theories about how did this come about?
There had to, obviously at some point there had to be some kind of online buzz or local news story or something about these kids that. Yeah, I bet you it was that first outing when the kid gets arrested, and then he actually goes to kind of counseling program. Like people knew something was up with him right away. So that had to at least get like some kind of buzz going. Or like, you know, the police that arrested him like went around to all the buddies in the station being like, dude, you're never gonna, this kid is literally like only seen the outside world 15 times in his entire life. He's 15 years old, average once per year, you know, whatever crazy number it is. And same with everybody that talked to him. And one thing I wish we could have seen were those kids like 2 weeks before they ever left the apartment for the first time on their own.
Right.
Because none of them had ever gone on an outing on their own or been in the real world on their own. So really, I would have been interested to see, because I get the impression they'd been out in the outside world for quite some time when the documentary that they have 5 years or something like that. So
yeah, I don't know. I didn't get that. I felt like I'm with you on the theory behind how this started. I think that like the filmmakers probably like either met him when he was like, you know, maybe they're, you know, somehow met him in his when he was in his psychiatric care or something, somehow like came into contact with him then. But I felt like it was like the filming started like fairly soon after that first excursion, like within a few months or something after that first excursion. But let me just also say that I watched this the day after we recorded our last episode, so there's a chance that, that I'm misremembering some certain facts along the way.
yeah, the reason I say that is because it's the oldest one that did the outing on his own. He was 15 when he did the outing, and I say it was like in 2010 or something like that. So I don't know what year this documentary was made, but that's why I thought there was a gap of a fairly substantial amount of time. I could be wrong too. Like I said, I watched it in 2 separate sittings, and
yeah, I'm not sure. It could be. I think it's either that because yeah, it didn't come out until 2015, so it's either that it was a gap before they started filming, or they just filmed it over. Like I could see this documentary being like they just go over to those people's house once every couple months and like talk to them for a little bit and film for a little bit or whatever over the course of a few years.
yeah, that would have been a great thing to know too, is how long, because I got the impression that it was over maybe a year. You know, it didn't seem like it was over this amount of time that they did the documentary, because the kids always stayed, you know, approximately the same age. I think like at that age you'd be able to tell a little bit more if it was filmed over, you know, 5 years. But I could be wrong. Maybe they just maybe staying in an apartment and not leaving it keeps you really young. I don't know.
I don't know. So let's talk about like just in case people haven't seen it, like just like let's give a little bit of setup of the family. So it's like this really this I don't even
yeah,
know
do explain it.
So the dad like has some very eclectic worldviews. Like he like they mentioned that he took some of the things like the not haircutting and a few other things from the Hare Krishna religion, but I don't believe that they were like of the Hare Krishna religion or anything. I think he just like took some stuff from some different religions they liked, and then like he named all the kids after like words that were in Sanskrit, which is the oldest known human language, because he thought that was cool. I guess I don't know. So they'll have like really unique names, and and he just did not want them to leave and didn't want anyone to leave. And it seemed like he was okay. Well, I guess there's a couple ways to look at it. Definitely like keeping them locked up in the apartment is definitely a form of abuse. But other than that, like it seemed like towards the kids he wasn't necessarily like abusive, other than cutting them off from the outside world, which I guess is pretty abusive. But it seemed like he was a little more abusive towards the mom. I don't know. What was your take on all that?
Yeah, I felt the same thing. I'm like, I thought the only, you know, quote abusive thing with kids was controlling, where
Right.
he would mention it one, he would send them to like come out until he mother him. But so he seemed really controlling of everyone, including the wife, and then he did seem actually physically abusive towards the wife occasionally. But yeah, I didn't get the impression that he was towards the children. Yeah, I mean, like certainly, like I don't even know if I'll call it abusive to keep them in the apartment. I mean, except for the fact that like if it was really like that, where we locked them in there and wouldn't let them go out, that's certainly a freakishly odd
Right.
way to raise your children. So I mean, but I don't think that in and of itself. I guess if you were just like, I mean, you could equate it to saying like, buying a house in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, like 100 miles from the nearest person, and raising a child in that environment. And that's a
Yeah,
very unusual way to raise your child, but it's not necessarily bad. I mean, the fact that you'd be like, I mean, it's essentially doing the same thing except in the middle of the city.
right. And they don't get to like, go outside or anything.
Yeah, that's pretty. I guess that's pretty horrible to just be like, I've never like walked in a park.
Right. Yeah, there's like one of the really shocking moments later in the movie for me was when they go to the beach and they're shocked by like a million different things at the beach, but the one thing is like they're like walking with their shoes and socks up in the sand. They're like, "Oh my God, it's so scratchy! It's totally scratchy." They're like totally surprised by like the texture of sand. Like, oh my God, these poor kids.
They must be so weird to talk to. Like, like they show one scene though where the one kid actually gets a job and he's hanging out with people, and you see him talking just for a little bit, but he's talking about like he's like, "Who here? Anybody who's seen Game of Thrones, raise their hand." And
and everyone's like,
which yeah, some people did raise their hand, like yeah. But I mean, like, I don't know, talk about anything. It's like if they what'd you do last? Like if you had been like, oh my gosh, guess what? We got 2 gallons of milk, and then like after we drank the milk, then we like made a thing out of it. Like, would he have had like something that he was really excited and like a cool story in his mind that everybody would have been like,
yeah, dude. That's not a cool story. Yeah, I don't know. I was like kind of impressed though with how like unweird they were. Like they definitely were weird in certain ways and things like that. And there were certain things that they said that were definitely off. But like yeah, I would assume they would have been weirder than they were, just being cut off from everyone but their parents and each other for so long.
Agreed. I would have thought they would have been much weirder. But there was one little scene where they're like, talking to the camera, and they're like, yeah, you should have seen, if you would have came in and interviewed us again, like I said, I would have been interested to see, like, just before, we left and before we started, like, going in the outside world, we would have just been, like, little robots or something like that, he said, or just, like, superly, like, timid and in their shells or whatever and not talking. So,
Right.
so that's where I had the impression that they'd had a couple years between that first exposure to the outside world and when the documentary started. Because they really weren't that weird. I mean, like,
Yeah, no, there's like every once in a while they say something like the one thing where they're talking about how if they weren't homeschooled, their mom would have to get a job, and the one guy was like, "Oh yeah, there's no way my mom would. I'm letting my mom go out in that city or whatever." Like there's some little stuff like that they said that you could tell their dad had an influence, but yeah, they didn't seem to be like as scared of people or anything like that as you would think you would be if you were just raised thinking that everyone was horrible and things like that.
right? Yeah, I wonder what that, like, because they did occasionally go out, like because they were talking about that, and they said like the most they ever went out was like 9 times in 1 year, and the least they ever went out was 0. So that must have been like, I wish they would, like, you don't see or hear much from the father for the mass majority of the documentary, and I wish they would have been like, well, why did you keep the kids inside for their entire lives? So I really wanted to know, like, what was going through his head about, like, not letting the kids out at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like, well, I think the mom talked about it a little bit, and it's interesting because, like, um, like her whole thing was just like that. Oh yeah, she didn't want to raise the kids in the city. She wishes she could raise them like in like Michigan or wherever she's from, where there's like fields to play in and they can get out and have fun and stuff like that. So, and there's like lots of bad influences in the city, which okay, I'm okay with that. But then your solution to that problem is let's just keep them in the apartment. All right.
Yeah. Wouldn't like the much more logical solution be like, well, let's just move to Michigan? I mean, like, yeah. And she was like, oh, well, we were really poor. It was like, well, yeah, you can be really poor in Michigan. You're really poor in New York. I mean, like, you can come up with $70 for bus fare to get to Michigan. I mean, like, you'd be leaving,
Right.
800 square feet. I guarantee in Michigan you can find 800 square feet to live
Yeah,
in.
the cost
You
of
know?
living is lower. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was the other thing too. I wish like they would have dove into like the money aspect a little bit more because yeah, that's the only line. So they have two things they talk about money. One being that the dad, his rebellion against the tyranny of the government is to work. Awesome. But then they're like, yeah, then they do that one line in the film about, oh yeah, if we went to school, then my mom wouldn't be a teacher for us and she wouldn't get any money. So I don't think they understood that at all. I assume that what she was getting was welfare and that, she opted to be to homeschool the kids. But those are really independent of each other. It's not like homeschool parents get a teacher salary from someone.
Right. Do you get the like I'm not super familiar with homeschooling, but do you get like some kind of like a I don't know stipend or I was gonna say like break out in your taxes or something, but I guess
Well, maybe I don't know.
making any
Yeah,
money.
yeah, they can't. Yeah, they can't get a break on their taxes because they have none. Maybe there is some stipend thing that they get for homeschooling their children that
Yeah,
I don't know.
like some maybe like the amount of money that the state would spend per student or something they send to you to buy
Right.
educational supplies or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I really wish they would have gone over. I mean, like obviously they had some degree of education. They could write and read and all that stuff. I really would love to know, like, if you gave them a set of standardized tests, like, would they just like would their minds explode? Would they be like, we've never heard of any of these things? Or they could have like aced them. They could have been like perfect scores too.
Mhm.
I mean, like you never know with homeschool kids,
Right.
and especially in that homeschool family, it could go either way.
Right. I'll tell you what, if standardized tests would have included like make the set of Batman Begins out of these 4 milk cartons and 6 egg crates, they would have freaking nailed that bad boy.
Yeah, that's how you know you're bored, man. That's how you know you live in an apartment for 15 years. When you're like, oh man, we're so bored. We're gonna recreate Reservoir Dogs, like everything. We're gonna rebuild the costumes. We're gonna make fake guns. We're gonna memorize every scene.
Right. The one part where I felt really really bad for the kids was when like one kid was like, yeah, I always like transcribe. I write out the script for the entire movie, and like you'd see him sitting there forever, like transcribing stuff. And I was just like thinking, God, this got to take forever to like totally transcribe all that stuff. And I was like, man, if only they had the internet, you can just go online and every script in the world is just there. You could print that bad boy out. Um, yeah, but so
Yeah, but on the other hand, he had the time. There was
right,
not a lot of going on in that apartment. If you need to take a day and a half to transcribe a movie, no big deal.
right.
You print it offline and you're gonna be like, man, now I got a day and a half to kill. This sucks.
Yeah, I think that like I do think that part of the reason they were less screwed up though than they could have been, and like I think one of the points of the movie is like their relationship with movies, and the movies were like how they related to the world and thought of the world and all that stuff. So that was like their window into the outside world, um, which was cool to see and stuff like that. I'm curious about like what weird misconceptions they have about the world because having experienced it only through movies, there's got to be some weird stuff that they think that's not true.
Yeah, but I thought of that, and like one thing I thought of, which hopefully is not the case. But I was like, man, having experienced like said the world through movies, like things could go terribly wrong with that. You know what I mean? Like they could like assault someone or like bring like because I mean violence and weapons are so commonplace and they don't have the same effect in a movie that they
Right.
do in real life. You know what I mean? In movies, people get shot 500 times in a movie and it's like no big deal, and the hero just keeps going, no big deal. Obviously, it's a much different case if one person is shot in real life. So I mean, like I could see that perception being so messed up that
Yeah.
you'd have to be worried about something like that. Or what if they wanted to like they get out in the real world and they're like, oh yeah, now I just want to act out Reservoir Dogs. Well, let's just do it with real guns now, or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So, but it seemed like they didn't. I hope.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, the first time they went out, they did. I remember that. Like I said, there was a couple weeks ago I saw it, but there wasn't. Didn't he have like a toy gun and he was like going around pretending to be a spy? Or I don't remember what the
No,
situation was, but
no, I thought it was much creepier than that. So they showed him in it. They made out of their like, random stuff around the house at one point a Michael Myers mask. And it was really good. I mean, it was super creepy and weird looking Michael Myers mask. And he wore that over his head out and just went around like to some stores around like the base of their building and just like walked around not talking to anybody. And eventually somebody got freaked out and called the cops. And at that point in time, he was so socially awkward that his interaction with the police ended up with him arrested, which I would love to have seen the police report on that. Yeah, subject was unresponsive, or subject like seemed incoherent or on drugs, but as it turned out, he'd just been locked in an apartment for 15 years. Yeah, like how did that go down? What was?
Yeah, you're right. That is much creepier.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy. That's some creepy
Yeah, and that was where you could tell, like, again, they were way different before they went out that first time, because he was like, yeah, I thought it would just be a lot safer if no one could recognize me, and that just was like, it seemed like a logical, sensible thing to like wear a creepy mask out into public and like walk around, that everyone would just be more at ease if he did that. Like, yeah, you really have a lot to learn about society, buddy.
All right. Yes, but I think, like all this, I do think that the movies probably helped them more than they hindered them. Hopefully, at least
I
like
think so.
expose them to other people and stuff like that, and even fictional other people. I did
and they did have a line or two in there where they're like, yeah, like I think one of them said something like, "I would have just killed myself if I didn't have movies. How could you exist or whatever?" And it was like, wow, yeah, that certainly some kind of a connection to other people that you had, and they really ran with it, like reenacting the movies and building this sets and all that. I mean, it gave them a purpose in the little world.
Yeah, I'm glad the one guy ended up working in as a production assistant or whatever in movies at the end there, because man, put his skills to use. If the costume designer doesn't show up and he got some egg crates,
boom, done.
He's gonna earn his keep that day. He's just waiting for that day to come. He's like, come on, don't show up, don't show up. I did think the scene was really nice when they went and saw their first movie in the theater. That was nice.
Agreed. That was my favorite scene in the documentary, when they hit the theater and they're like, it was a big special night and they all went out and like they're all talking like, I'll never forget this night, and everything was really cool. It was cool.
Yep. The one guy, I don't remember what movie they saw, but it must have had Christian Bale in it, because the one guy was like, I play him.
Yeah, that was the other part where I was like, how detached are you from reality? You're like, yeah, I play him in Batman. And we're like, no, you guys are just in your apartment goofing around. That's not doing anything.
I thought it was cute.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else about I do wish they would have had a little more about the dad, but I felt like that they're kind of probably on the razor's edge with the dad. Like, he probably just barely would let them be there, and like he would just like go into his room and drink or whatever when they were there. And they probably didn't want to push their luck too much, I guess. But
yeah,
but that's the kind of thing where I think the standard journalistic thing would be to do like one final interview where you don't care if you get kicked out or whatever. Then
sure, maybe they did. There was one like interview with the dad where he was just saying like random catchphrases, I guess you'd call it. I mean, like, you could tell that was just like his, and maybe at this point that's all the dad has, is just like he just like loops back through his little rationales for all his like stuff, that makes it make sense in his head, that he lives in this apartment, doesn't let his family out, and like doesn't work because whatever. So he just kept like looping back to weird little like sayings and expressions about the enlightenment of Christ, and like weird little mishmash pieces of religions and little philosophies, where it all just like, I guess you can't get out of that loop, because if you did, you'd be like, oh man, I'm just a crazy person in an apartment, I should really get a job, do something with my life.
Right. Yeah. He had like kind of cool backstory too, wasn't he? Like a tour guide in the mountains or something, and then
yeah, some weird third world I can't remember which country he came from, but he was like, yeah, a weird like mountain guide thing for tourists, and that's how I met his wife, and she was
Yeah.
all impressed by him. And then instead of staying in that like super awesome like natural rainforest, they got a super crowded in New York and just
Right.
from one to the other like that. That just
Yeah, I was thinking like probably everyone in a crappy apartment in New York is like, God, man, I would love to. So I just want to get away. Like I just imagine some place in the mountains would be so great. Is the opposite true? Is like everyone in the mountains like, man, I just wish I could be in some crappy little apartment, dude.
no, no,
Sweet.
that is not the case. They might think little thoughts like, you know, I bet it's awesome. There's like paper roads and stuff. I guarantee they're not shooting for the crappy New York apartment. That might be the reality of what they end up with.
If only I didn't have so much beauty.
Right.
Great and space. Oh man.
Yeah, the beauty, space, and freedom of this land is killing me.
Hate it. Hate it. Crazy. All right. Well, anything else to say about this one?
Oh, the only other thing I wanted to mention. Did you feel like there's 7 children, 6 boys and a girl, and I assume that is the youngest is the girl.
Yeah,
I think
so.
it's the youngest. And she seemed like her life is horrible. She was the only one that she was never went out with the boys. She never like, I don't think she was ever interviewed or said a single word in the entire documentary. Yeah, I was like, somebody should address that. Like,
Right. Yeah.
what's going on with that girl? She's just like off on her own and.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I hope some social workers came to the house after this documentary made $1 billion. Like, hey,
Yeah,
what's going on here?
yeah. So anyway, so yeah, did you ever like catch anything on her or think it like?
No, yeah, I mean, I did I thought it was weird that they didn't talk about her too much, and she was kind of always in the background kind of thing. But yeah, now that you mention it, that's disconcerting.
Yeah, that was disconcerting to me. Anyway. Well, I guess her life is horrible. Let's move on.
All right.
Right, yay.
Nice. All right. Well, how many stars are you going to give the Wolfpack?
I'll give the Wolfpack 3.5 stars. I liked it in its own cute little way.
Yeah, that's kind of about what I was thinking. 3.5 all around.
There you go.
Job
It's official.
Wolfpack. I would like to someone to give these boys a budget and have them make a movie and see it. Although that one movie that they did make was pretty weird, where just a guy was sitting in a chair and all the emotions were coming by him or whatever. That's pretty weird.
Yeah, no, I think they would like. I guess that's the other thing I thought of is like, I wonder if people who make really interesting pieces of art or really interesting films, whatever, come from unusual backgrounds. Because if you gave these guys a big budget and actually like let them go make a film, I would love to see it. Just how crazy it would be. I mean, would it be like ridiculous, like a dude sitting in front of a window with the like a higher budget version of that with some CGI effects? Or would they, like, if they had a big enough budget, would they actually sit down and write a script? Like, where would their minds go with it? Because I mean, like, obviously anybody else, if you gave them the money, they'd be like, well, first we need a script, then we need to hire some actors, then we need to get a producer, and then they just go through the steps. This is how a movie is made. That's what they would do. These guys, who knows? It could go any direction, and that could be amazing, or it could be horrific, like the Window movie, or whatever. But it would be worth seeing, I think.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, I believe you got some choices for next week's flick. Do you not?
I do. And you're only gonna get the titles of each one, so you're gonna have to go. You're gonna judge these books by their covers. All right.
Okay.
1 is Last Days in Vietnam. 2.
Okay. That title pretty much like lays it out pretty good. I feel like I know what that movie's about.
Right. There's 2. You're probably pretty good on what this one is if you haven't already seen it. Terms and Conditions May Apply.
Okay.
And 3, The Square. Could be about geometry. You don't know.
Could be. All right. Cool. I've not seen any of those.
Ooh.
Um, hmm. I have heard of the Square, and I've heard of terms and conditions may apply. I think I want to go with terms and conditions may apply, just because I feel like we haven't done that kind of documentary in a while. We haven't done like the issues kind of documentary in a bit.
Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it?
So
All right.
yeah, so let's go with terms and conditions may apply, and see if I'm scared to click accept next time my iPhone updates or whatever.
Cool. Yeah, if you got any, I'm now Mark Zuckerberg's friend of a friend. So
Oh, no, man. Nice. Well done.
right on. Thank you. I haven't actually met Mark Zuckerberg, but
Well, I was sure he was just he just upped his status to like the sixth richest person or something.
oh, really nice.
Yeah, it's a good job.
Yeah,
Good job,
yeah.
Tim. All right, cool. Oh, for my thing, I'm going to talk about this week. I think since going on the movie theme, I'm going to recommend the TV show. And I'm recommending this with a torn heart, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend the show The Chair, which is I think on Stars or Showtime. One of those had a free trial a couple weeks ago, and I just like watched this whole show. It's a reality show where they take one script and they take two directors who have like gone through this whole process. They've gone through this process to pick these two directors, and they have them both make a movie out of the same script, and then they like the audience votes or whatever at the end, and I don't know, the person gets a prize or something at the end. I don't remember exactly what the prize was, but it was pretty like it's kind of like the reason I'm like hesitant a little bit to recommend it is because like they definitely chose the people based on like they wanted to create drama and stuff like that, of course, because
sure, of course.
But it was actually really interesting for like the whole filmmaking process and like just how like because the films were vastly different at the end.
Cool.
So it was pretty interesting to see like how a director can his vision can totally shift things. So it was pretty good. I'd recommend watching it, and I definitely binge watched it over a few days, so it's pretty captivating, I think.
Awesome.
So that's The Chair.
Cool.
That's my recommendation. All right. If you want to contact us, do so at feedback@documentaryreviewpodcast.com. This is PT. I'll talk to you next time. Keep it real.
This is Jonathan. We'll see you next week.